Welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. Today is a very, very interesting show. Justice J.B. Pardiwala and Justice R. Mahadevan have held that disabled uh, persons cannot be excluded from judicial examinations. This, of course, was an issue that came from Madhya Pradesh. The Supreme Court took suo motu cognizance also. And of course, they've set the record straight. Now this is applicable to all states in the country. But Supreme Court has stood for the rights of disabled people, that simply being disabled, you cannot be sort of excluded from judicial services. Why this is important, we will get to know from our panelists. Let me welcome today Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria, Senior Advocate Arvind Nair, Neharika Karanjawala Misra from Karanjawala and Company, Advocate Aditya Ajgaonkar joins us from the city of Mumbai. Good to see all of you and look forward to a very interesting show. At the outset, let me request Mr. Bilimoria to make the opening comment. Over to you, Mr. Bilimoria. Could you explain this out? And then we'll begin with specific questions. You're not audible. You need to unmute.
Extremely laudable decision by the Supreme Court. Essentially saying that, look, it's not just saying that disabled individuals are eligible for judicial service. It says that there can be affirmative action. And I really believe that if ever there is one class of people who deserve affirmative action, it is judicially disabled. Now, this is where the person concerned had the highest.
Mr. Bilimoria, there is some problem with your audio. Till you check your audio, I'll go to Senior Advocate Arvind Nair and come back to you. You can maybe check your audio till then. I'll go to Senior Advocate Arvind Nair for his opening comment.
Hi, Tarun. Good evening. Thank you for hosting a show on something very, very important, but not perhaps always given the importance it deserves. I have 3 or 4 points to make about this. One is that, we live in a very, very visual age where there is a lot of social media, a lot of articles, a lot of legal websites, and the Honorable Supreme Court gets a lot of comments. Not all those comments are from people who are duly qualified or experienced to do so. But be that as it may, this judgment, I think, shows, and we've always known this, but shows that right from the time it was established, our Honorable Supreme Court has been the repository of empathy, compassion, inclusiveness, and walking the talk. It's not just about giving these speeches or making these declarations, but it's actually reflected in judgments. I think this is an extremely important judgment, perhaps at the same level from those judgments all those years ago when Justice Krishna Iyer first expounded the public interest litigation. He expanded that part. He was able to, through his judgments, make it accessible to everybody. So that's one part. Second is that this particular judgment, in fact, is the result of suo motu cognizance by the Honorable Supreme Court following a letter petition submitted by the mother of a visually impaired law aspirant. Now, this is, as I said, in fact, even though it was not titled as such because it was suo motu cognizance that was taken, but this is actually the purest kind of public interest that we have seen. This is what Justice Krishna Iyer and judges, his colleagues at that time, this is what they were looking at. This is what they had in mind when they were expanding the scope of the Honorable Supreme Court judgments, reaching out and benefiting everybody, the man on the ground. Now, certain provisions of the Madhya Pradesh Act were challenged. And again, it sort of shows to us that there are several of these rules. India is a large country. There are so many issues before the governments of the day. There are so many of these rules which are classical examples of exclusion that perhaps were framed 75, 80 years ago, but have remained on the statute book because they have escaped contemporary notice. So what this judgment shows is that a lot of these rules now will perhaps be looked at, reopened, and set aside. That, I think, is very, very important. What is even more important in this judgment is that, and this is reflected, in fact, when I was going through, I checked para 10. Now, in this judgment, the Honorable Supreme Court impleaded by an order of 15th of April 24, they impleaded one Dr. Sanjay Jain, distinguished professor of law at the National Law School of India, University, Bangalore, who has 25 years of teaching experience and has been totally blind since birth. He was impleaded as an intervener to assist the court in connection with this issue. Now, as I said, walk the talk. What can be more satisfying than this? That we have something which has truly ended up expanding the scope of judiciary, which is another word for being inclusive. And this happened with the intervention of somebody who's so distinguished, who's gotten over this handicap. In fact, I shouldn't be using that word. I'm sorry. Who's gotten over this who's so distinguished, 25 years of teaching experience. I mean, it can't get better than this. And as my friend Percy was saying, a perfect example of affirmative action. Our constitution recognizes affirmative action very well, and this is yet another example. I think I'm reminded of that saying. I may not remember the exact words. This is a giant leap as far as inclusiveness is concerned, as far as expansion of rights of such people is concerned.
Point very well taken. And of course, this is a laudable judgment by Justice J.B. Pardiwala and Justice R. Mahadevan. We'll go to Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria for his opening comment. You need to unmute.
So, Tarun, extremely laudable. And my own view is that of all the classes of persons who really deserve and require a little leg up in the form of affirmative action, it essentially the persons with disabilities. And here in this judgment, I think Justice Pardiwala made the point that there have been excellent examples of lawyers with disabilities doing excellent work in their profession, and that any disability is not an impediment to professional competence. And I think that's something that needs to be, I'm glad that that's been recognized. I personally feel that it's not just physical disability, but there are instances of people with even, mental disabilities. So, for example, what we have traditionally believed to be mental disability, some of these people are much more intelligent. So, for example, science has now found that autistic people are different. You can't even call them disabled. They are just different. And in fact, they are much more intelligent than the common people. They have innate abilities to understand, the environment, etc., that you and I will not have. Here, the real point that was made is that the person concerned did not pass the interview, or rather, there was a cutoff for the interview, and it was eminently possible for the cutoff to be waived or to be raised for him. And incidentally, he scored the highest among all the disabled people who were there. He scored the highest, except that in the interview he could not score more than the cutoff. So I think it's a landmark decision.
Thank you for that opening comment. We'll go to Niharika Karanjawala Misra from Karanjawala and Company. Your firm does, and has in the past 4-5 decades, done many of such matters involving the rights of individuals and human rights. In that sense, right to livelihood. Over to you for your opening comment.
Thank you so much, Tarun. I couldn't agree more with Percy sir and Arvind sir. At the heart of this judgment is empathy, which is something that is so important to see in all of the judgments we put forward, because it speaks more to the outlook with which our judiciary views the citizens of the country. And I think that is the greater message here, that people will always be viewed with empathy and understanding, and the move will forever proceed towards greater inclusivity. It's also very significant, not only from the perspective of giving of affirmative action towards people who are differently abled, but also for the community at large, for the legal community at large. The fact that disabilities and neurodivergences are not keeping unique legal minds out of the profession is a very strong point and will only strengthen our own community and will strengthen the level of the judiciary that is presented to the Indian people. So both from the perspective of people with disabilities and from the perspective of the judiciary and the legal profession as a whole, I think this is a very important judgment. And as Percy sir said, I think it'll truly be come to seen as a landmark judgment in terms of granting rights, especially with regards to the differently abled.
Thank you for that opening comment. And go across to Aditya Ajgaonkar, who joins us from the city of Mumbai. Over to you, Aditya, for your opening comment.
This judgment is fantastic for multiple points. One very interesting thing that this judgment does is that it pushes the envelope when it comes to jurisprudence regarding the Act itself, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. And it is very interesting because there's a certain paragraph in this judgment that now states that this Act is like a super statute, and it has got a quasi-constitutional status. They say that, it's all very recent because the Act itself is, a 2016 Act, and it came into force in 2017. By Indian standards, it's a very new Act, right? And they say that, it has got the status of a super statute, and that it basically has a quasi-constitutional significance that exceeds its former status as just a statute. And I think this is going to be very interesting because this is going to push the boundaries of jurisprudence, because super statute is something, that now will be used, according to me, to also bring out various other aspects of jurisprudence when it comes to rights of people with disability or rights of persons with disability. I don't think it is only an aspect of, whether someone who is differently abled or someone who has a certain degree of limitation with regards to eyesight, which was the case in this particular factual matrix. I think we are going to see a lot of interesting constitutional aspects come to light with respect to this Act as the envelope is pushed. And I think, one small judgment for the Supreme Court, one giant leap forward for jurisprudence.
It's a point very well taken indeed. And with this, I'll extend the question to the fact that will this ruling have broader implications to employment rights for persons with disabilities? I'll go to Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria. What Justice Pardiwala and Justice Mahadevan have done, stirring a debate within the judiciary. Secondly, will it have larger implications across services?
I think it should, but see, one must understand that the judgment puts a person with disability on par with someone who doesn't. What it says is that people with disabilities are not necessarily incapable or hindered in any way from becoming good jurists. Now, that's a very important issue. Now, there could be professions where, that may not necessarily be the case. For example, you can't have someone who has a eyesight disability become a pilot, right? So we have to take it with a little common sense. But as far as the judiciary is concerned, it's a landmark decision. What we have to now look for is, broadening this a little. So I do believe that, in our country, persons with disabilities do have the rough end of the stick. So, for example, there are guidelines, I believe, that every hotel, for example, should have a ramp for somebody who's on a wheelchair. I find that this is a rule which is followed more by breach. And these are some of the things that we need to rectify. And there will be several instances where this comes to light, and there will be no one better than people who suffer this every day. I remember in the Delhi High Court, there was a case that was filed by someone with eyesight disability, and his issue really was, how do I cross on a zebra crossing? Even if I'm on a zebra crossing, the point is the traffic is just uncontrollable. It just doesn't, so this is something that has to be set out. And I know that the judge at that time who was hearing that case set out a lot of guidelines for the MCD to follow. including the fact that there should be ramps from the pavement to the crossing road. And
you've raised a very valid point, but you complete your point. You're speaking.
yeah, so all I'm saying is that there will be an extension of this principle, which is that any person with disability must be enabled by society to lead a normal life. I think that should be the overall principle. Just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you will be discriminated against. And in this case, I'm afraid that there was discrimination, and it's a good thing it's been remedied. But we also have to, go to, the next step and use this judgment to try and create facilities, even though they are mandated by law or there are certain guidelines in building regulations, etc., they are not followed. And this needs to be taken up.
You've raised a very valid point. Though Justice Pardiwala and Justice Mahadevan have allowed disabled people the right to, take exams and join the judiciary, the court infrastructure also needs to keep up, and I think that's the next order that the court should give, and also some funds should come in. The court has now money, and of course we get those funds, but I think the infrastructure, except for Delhi High Court, Supreme Court, may be a bit of a question mark. I don't even know if Supreme Court has conducive facilities for disabled people. People who go every day may be able to tell better. I'll go to Senior Advocate Arvind Nair to come on this point.
Tarun, as Percy said, there are so many things that we've always known. We've always, our constitution has embodied equal rights for everyone. But as I said, some of these old statutes remain. And now with the reiteration about these rights from the Honorable Supreme Court, there is going to be this is like a door that's open. And I think this is going to go down to the ground. Let's not forget that India has a very large judicial system. Of course, we have the Honorable Supreme Court at the top. Then we have state high courts, and we have so many trial courts, the number of districts. The effect of this judgment is going to percolate to all of those courts. And I think it will take some time. I won't be surprised if you find a slew of applications that are filed, sort of with people saying that the ratio of this judgment has not been effectively followed. So this has opened the door, and that door is now going to keep opening wider and wider. That's point one. Point two is not, that this is not the only kind of discrimination. There are other kinds of discrimination also, as people here said, Aditya said, Percy said, Niharika said about differently abled people. In fact, I can give you an example from my own family. I have a niece who's on the autism spectrum, and I was rather pleasantly surprised that she is about to publish a full anthology of poetry. Now, so coming back, it's intelligence of a different kind. The other thing is, point three is that we follow a system of precedent. So once there is a right, there is a view that we all know, but once it bears the stamp of our Honorable Supreme Court, it just becomes that much more easy to implement. And it will, as I said, this has to seep down to the ground. It has to go to every district court. It has to be followed by the high courts. Once it gets into every nook and cranny that forms our system, judicial system, and other wings, of course, the bureaucracy. There are so many. India is run by hundreds and thousands of government departments. This is going to have more effect than we can probably envisage at this stage. I think it's going to be seen to be believed, and the fact is that the Justice Pardiwala is slated to be Chief Justice of India. The other positive development is that whatever applications are filed, or there are any follow-up petitions, he's going to be there. So I think it's, again, this has been said. I said this, Aditya said it. It's a giant leap. It's just the beginning of something very positive.
Point very well taken. I'll take this to Advocate Niharika Karanjawala Misra from Karanjawala and Company. Do you think the court under now Justice Pardiwala and Justice Mahadevan is taking a step towards inclusion by this judgment? Inclusions of various types. Sometimes earlier, the whole of last year, we spoke about gender orientation and inclusivity. Now it's disabled and inclusive. That case, of course, you had a role to play in. So do you think the court is slowly, in a sense, as we are growing and maturing as a democracy, these things are being
Absolutely.
discussed? So
Absolutely. And everything will come in its own time. Inclusivity of all kinds will come in their own time, because we are in large part a very divided society. Large part in terms of our thought processes, large parts of society still feel that a disability or a neurodivergence such as autism is something that will hold you back forever, and you will forever be on a lower pedestal and at a complete disadvantage from everybody else around you. But when, especially, I mean, from the gender perspective and orientation perspective, of course, we can all see what the distinctions are. So we are, in terms of our thought processes, a very divided society still, but I feel that the courts are the ones that lead us towards greater societal acceptance at every level. And seeing a judgment like this, seeing the empathy in a judgment like this, the emphasis on inclusivity in a judgment like this, it's very, very heartening. And I feel that the effect on society will be trickle down, and it will be significantly impactful. As Arvind sir said, Justice Pratibala is slated to be Chief Justice of India, and he will be here to see other judgments of this sort. Justice Mahadevan will also be here. All of the judges of the Supreme Court do come forward in this march towards a more progressive, a more accepting, and a more inclusive society. And I really feel that this judgment is a strong indicator of that as well. It's a strong indicator, and we hope to just see more and more judgments of this kind. And like Percy sir said, we hope to see this at different levels. So we hope to see more inclusion in terms of accessibility, in terms of job opportunities, in terms of general thought and outlook. And it's just great to see one more step in the progress towards that.
indeed, it's true that, in fact, I would believe that people from other nations, developed nations, would take note of such judgments that the Indian Supreme Court gives. Because these things are noted worldwide, and I think that is also we discussed this issue because these things are noted by courts of the world and jurists of the world. That on these issues, where do our courts stand?
And it shows us in a good light. It shows us in a kind and a positive light.
Indeed, agreed. So, Aditya, I would want to know, say, in the city of Mumbai, where you go to the High Court and other forums, how disabled friendly are buildings? For judges, are there special facilities to get in if they are disabled? Do you think on that count we are doing good, or a lot needs to be done? I'm talking of Mumbai, of course. I'm not talking of interiors of Maharashtra. It may be different. How is it in Mumbai?
I have also appeared in interiors of Maharashtra, right from magistrate court. So I will be able to answer you on that also. But see, the Bombay High Court is a 150-year-old building. So it is from a very different time. Of course, the invention of elevators, and by the way, the Bombay High Court does have ramps, on either side of the building. So I will not say that it is not very disabled friendly, or let's not say disabled, let's say for persons with disabilities friendly. It is a lot more, of course, can be done, because a 150-year-old building is a trouble even for those people who are running around, not enough lifts, not enough stairways. That is why the Mumbai High Court is getting a new building. The City Civil Sessions Court, etc., are a bit more modern. We have a very new magistrate court complex that has come up, which is multi-storied, around 13 stories. So I think, to an extent, we're catching up with Delhi, where, I was awestruck when I saw the Delhi buildings first, even at the magistrate level. But let's not get this into a Bombay versus Delhi debate. That is never ending. But yes, there are signs that things will improve even further, especially because now that the new Bombay High Court building is being planned, right? That is something that will, of course, come into the mind of anyone making it. But interestingly, Tarun, let us not forget that the matter itself is about appointment of someone who is, slightly differently abled, or someone who has disabilities to a judicial post. And considering the fact that this is not just Delhi we are talking about, in fact, this one was from Madhya Pradesh, and I'm sure this will be used across the country. We are talking about judicial officers who will be posted even to the mufossils, who will be posted all across. And I think that is going to bring about institutional change also and infrastructure changes also, because if we are going to have people get better representation as a part, as a form of affirmative action, because the Supreme Court goes into a lot of aspects with respect to your golden triangle of fundamental rights, about how dignity has to, someone living, these are old ideas which have been repeated again and again by the Supreme Court, saying that right to life is not mere animal existence, there has to be dignity involved, there is right to livelihood. We are talking about a judiciary that will not only have representation from people who are certain disabilities, but the infrastructure will catch up. And most importantly, when they are giving justice at grassroots levels, I think we'll see a lot of empathy grow also. And I think that is going to be a brilliant offshoot of this.
I take your point here that simply because of this one point, that a judge with disabilities is going to court, what it may actually lead to is, when you said small things, will improve. Introduction of braille, maybe if there is a visual disability, at every step there'll be small minor improvements that only can happen when a person of such ability works. I think indeed this has been a fruitful discussion. We were able to raise relevant points. The Supreme Court has shown so much of empathy, and these are subjects that I think erstwhile were discussed only in developed nations. India is now witnessing, a Supreme Court which goes into these issues and adjudicates, and this will have a far-reaching impact. I would like to thank Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria, Senior Advocate Arvind Nair, Niharika Karanjawala Misra from Karanjawala and Company, Advocate Aditya Ajgaonkar, who joins us from the city of Mumbai, and Justice Pardiwala and Justice Mahadevan for giving us such an order. It was indeed a pleasure doing this show, and we thank the Supreme Court for such orders that we get to discuss the sensitive side of things, where we show that we are a population and a judiciary that thinks about the people, and it is much more than adjudicating on commercial other issues. We would look forward to doing shows on many such more judgments that the Supreme Court may give in future. Appreciate your joining us. Thank you so very much.